being and to come back where I belong. And I've been continuing to work with that and to kind of rebuild my life and find out who I want to be.
And then of course inspire others. So in the years after your accident, it's obviously very personal, you're inside your own head,
Yes.
wondering if you'll ever be able to walk again, will you be able to have a family, but then how have you used that then as a springboard to help other people?
Well, my story, I mean, falling down from the sky is obviously not something that you do every day. But I do believe that my story is universal because we all go through adversities in life. We all have our own personal challenges. And I realized by telling my story, by being honest and naked, to all these strangers, and by revealing my weakness, then I would be able to help and inspire other people to believe in themselves, to try to find their own passion, find out what makes them happy, and maybe even teach them like or not teach them, but tell them what helped for me and what actually made me continue on my journey. And I'm thinking that if my story and the fact that I'm telling it and using my experience now into inspiring others, if I can help one person to go through his or her adversities, if I can make one person change his or her life for the better, it's worthwhile. Then my story has been a good thing.
So the discourse in the United States anyway today is it's such a polarizing conversation. But for example, you have on the one hand Black Lives Matter movement, on the other hand people trying to question the need for that movement, and it becomes really not even a rational conversation. It becomes sort of a heated debate that's quite irrational. Why is that? Why can't we have a rational conversation about such critical issues, and should we?
Well, I mean, yes, I think that we need to, and I think that the conversation is actually not Black Lives Matter as much as it's a conversation about race and racism in this country. And I think that the conversation about Black Lives Matter, if it does one thing, it is to highlight the fact that we haven't, as a U.S., as the country, ever really had a conversation about race and racism and U.S. history and the role that race and racism has played in U.S. history, economically, politically, socially, all of those things. And so we go through these cycles almost where we kind of start the conversation and then something happens and we say, well, we don't need the conversation, actually, everything is fine. And then something happens and then we kind of start the conversation. But I mean, I think that it's very clear to me that it is a fundamental conversation that we need as a country now as much as we ever have in the past. I think that, there was, with the election of President Obama, there was a conversation about a post-racial U.S., which was never true. But I mean, what it did bring up, I think, is that it brought out the residual racism in places that we thought it had ceased to exist, or at least that it had been buried deeply enough that it wasn't going to bother anybody.
Well, I don't know if you all were taught in grade school or high school about Africa. I was, and we learned a lot about Europe. Never learned anything about, and of course you weren't educated.
Well, we grew up in Africa.
Young
so-
children.
We didn't learn much about Africa
Okay, you did not.
on the
You
continent
didn't.
either.
You
No,
didn't?
no,
Okay.
No.
So
no.
African history is, I had to go to South Africa to learn
We
about
had to educate
about
ourselves.
We had to
Okay,
educate
so
ourselves.
yeah, but
in
you do
Europe
that when
we
you
do.
In
We
Europe?
learn about, yes.
Okay.
We do, and for me, I mean, we just had a brief conversation about it because watching the news, I mean, coming from Norway, coming from Europe, we obviously live in a completely different world, and we have a totally different relationship to the police. We have a different relationship to black people, I don't know, to all. To me, we're all people. And of course, we have racism in Norway as everywhere else in the world, but it's so, it's not understandable that we can actually treat people like that. And for me, I mean, a human life is like a kid. It's a kid. It's still a kid, and I don't understand how we can see and not see the kid that we all see. I mean,
But Laura, aren't we making progress, or are we just not making progress fast enough, or are we just going sideways?
Well, you know, for me as a white South African growing up in a country that was the pariah of the world, I actually grew up thinking that racism was a South African thing. I didn't know any better. And I thought when I left the borders of South Africa that I would be leaving racism behind. And instead what I found was that it was everywhere. And it has helped me understand many conflicts. When I was in Kosovo and I would listen to the Serbian people talk about the Albanians, you could have substituted black and white in that conversation. And it was easy for me to identify what that conflict was really about at its heart, was that the Serbs don't view the Albanians as human beings. They see them as less and as worthless. And you know, you can have the same conversation in Australia. And when I came to the United States, I was shocked to find that people, when I went to places like Atlanta, people would say, well, that's, you know, the black side of Atlanta and that's the white side. And I was like, what? Wait, say that to me again. And that was really an education for me. And I found that our lives in South Africa were much more integrated in many, many respects than in the United States, just because you had 40 million or so black people and 5 million or so white people, and so a degree and level of integration that's unheard of in many parts of America was normal in South Africa, even under apartheid. Now that didn't explain or excuse the racist side of the ideology that existed at the time. But so for me, and I'm always very careful because, you know, I'm not American and I didn't grow up here, but my children are born here and my husband is American and my life is invested in the values that make America. The South African Constitution that was written in part by Naomi's father and certainly was formed by his actions and the commitment that he made throughout his life is based on the United States Constitution. And one thing I like to tell people here is you may have learned about the Constitution growing up in high school, but I lived that. I was on the streets of South Africa when you would have 50,000, 100,000, 150,000 people come to protest for Nelson Mandela and would walk holding hands, singing the ANC's national anthem, which was banned at the time, and literally have the riot police and watch people fall as the bullets, you know, the rubber bullets hit them, and rubber bullets can kill. And I would go into the homes of people whose children had died protesting and, you know, had been executed in the back of the head and their bodies cast aside by the South African police. And so for me, freedom of speech is not something theoretical, it's not something academic, it's not a great idea that the forefathers came up with. It's something that lives and breathes in my blood and in my DNA and in my dreams and in everything that makes me human. And so I hate it when people say, oh, you're an adrenaline junkie, you like to go to war. I don't like to go to war. I like to go to places where those values are being tested. And I believe what Mandela always taught and Tutu lived, that the people are the founders of the democracy. And I think the sheriff in Dallas just said a similar thing in his press conference recently. Democracy is nothing without the people. We hold our leaders accountable. And if we don't hold our leaders accountable, and if we don't hold our press accountable, then we don't have democracy. You have some fake version of it. And I think sometimes people have forgotten that freedom isn't free. And that means many different things. But it means getting off your butt, you know, and getting out there and standing up for what you believe in one form or way or another. So, you know, I'm not so, I don't think it's my place to say whether have we made progress, have we not? I can tell you what, you know, one of the senior black people in law enforcement in the FBI said to me on my way, when I saw him on my way here, his version of it, compared to, you know, what one of the black guys in New York on the street last night was talking to me about last night, and their views were so different. And I looked at CNN last night, and they had 3 black congressmen, all, you know, from those districts, all talking about that. But you do have 3 black congressmen representing those districts, and that counts for something. But it doesn't mean that everything is fixed. One of my closest friends in the United States chose where she was going to live specifically because she had 2 black babies, and she didn't want her sons growing up in a certain part of New York where she said I wasn't going to have a moment's peace knowing that they were out on those streets. So she took them to a Jewish neighborhood, white Jewish neighborhood, you know, of Scarsdale, because she felt that they'd be safer there. So there's one thing I learned in my job is that the closer you get to an issue, the more complex it becomes. My mother used to say, the older I get, the less I know.
Yeah, and the more
And
things you learn, right?
The more you learn, the less you know.
Okay, so unfortunately we're out of time. I could go forever with you three amazing women. But last question, maybe each of you could address.
I'd like to know
Please.
one thing though, because I always like to start with the little things, and I would like to learn from you two. If I were to do one thing, you know, to make the situation better, to try to eliminate the fear of the black people, of apartheid, of racism, what would I do if I wanted to start, just little by little, to make it better? How could I do that?
Well, talking as a black person, I always say that for me the first step that I would like people to make is to acknowledge that racism exists, because I think that so very often that what we're up against, people saying, well, you're just imagining all of this, and the practical ways. I mean, so one practical way for me, which I have asked of people, is that when you're in a shop, for instance, and you see security following a black woman, which is my experience. I'm shopping and all of a sudden security is, for some reason, I look particularly suspicious. That when you see that and you see me turn and ask the security guard, why is it you're following me in particular? And then they say something like, oh, I wasn't following you in particular. Why are you say you're getting all the, say, no, as a white person to stand and say, I saw that too. And I am going to make it clear that this is not some crazy angry black woman playing out here in the department store or the grocery store. This is a reality of people's lives, and and again, as you say, it's one small step, and it makes a difference in one person's life in that particular instance. But it also is a step of, say, acknowledging that racism is something that exists in our communities.
There's a real
Thank you.
tangible frustration, isn't there? That is a great insight. From people of color that you talk to that get pulled over, you can hear their sense of frustration, and they say, you know, you as a white person don't understand what it's like. You have to say, I certainly don't. But unfortunately, like I say, we have to leave it there. Thank
Well,
you
thank
so much,
you.
Naomi,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Clara, and
And
Karina
thank
for
you.
coming on theCUBE. Great to meet you all.
And just
Thank
so we
you.
don't get into trouble, the other side of that is I have a friend whose husband is a policeman who every time he walks out the door every night, she doesn't know if he's coming home.
I'm glad you
And
mentioned
she
that,
lives in
right?
that kind of fear, you know?
Anybody
which,
who puts on a uniform.
which is
And
not
that's
to
not
justify
and
it.
I'm also saying, but that's not the other side of the story. That's my point, is that there are black policemen, but it's like each time we talk about racism, it's as though we're saying we're attacking the police, which has never been what Black
You
Lives
should be
Matter
able to
has
talk
been
about these things without that.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
also believe that it has a lot to do with information, lack of information. Like you're saying that you're not even taught in school. And we do naturally have fear of the unknown. And
Okay.
I fear everything that I don't know anything about. And so if I don't know about South Africa, if I don't learn from school, I will naturally have fear because I don't understand you. I don't see you. You're different from me.
So that's where, for me, it began at home, where I was raised in a home where we were taught not to fear anything.
Yes.
And we were taught to be open to people, and we were taught to listen, and we were taught to know what we stood for and not be afraid to stand